Sarah Martinez never talked about her military service. The small coastal town of Millfield knew her as the quiet woman who ran the local coffee shop, always arriving before dawn to prepare fresh pastries and brew the perfect cup. Her hands moved with precision behind the counter, but most customers attributed her efficiency to years of practice, not military training. At 28, Sarah had already lived 3 different lives. The first was as a rebellious teenager in Detroit, constantly getting into fights and disappointing her hard-working single mother. The second began when a Marine recruiter visited her high school and saw something in the angry young woman that others missed. 8 years in the Navy followed, including 3 grueling years of SEAL training that only a handful of women had ever completed. The third life started 6 months ago when she bought the coffee shop with her military savings. She wanted peace, normalcy, and the chance to heal from memories that still woke her up at night. The town embraced their new business owner, though some noticed her unusual habits. She never sat with her back to the door. Her eyes constantly scanned the room. When the espresso machine hissed unexpectedly, her entire body would tense for just a moment before relaxing. Her closest friend in town was Emma, a kindergarten teacher who lived in the apartment above the bookstore next door. Emma was everything Sarah wasn't: bubbly, trusting, and completely innocent about the darker sides of life. She had grown up in Millfield, surrounded by the same familiar faces since childhood. The friendship surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. "You're like a mystery novel," Emma often teased. "I keep waiting for the big reveal about your past." Sarah would just smile and change the subject. How could she explain that her past included missions in 3 different countries, skills that could neutralize a threat in seconds, and nightmares about teammates who didn't make it home? How could she tell someone who saw good in everyone about the necessary violence she'd witnessed and participated in? The coffee shop became Sarah's sanctuary. She learned her customers' names and orders, listened to their small-town gossip, and slowly began to feel something she'd almost forgotten: belonging. Mrs. Henderson came in every Tuesday for her decaf latte and to complain about her neighbor's loud dog. College student Jake always ordered a triple espresso and studied for his engineering exams in the corner booth. The mayor stopped by every Friday morning to discuss town events and try to convince Sarah to join the Chamber of Commerce. But Sarah's carefully constructed peaceful life began to crack 3 weeks before the incident that would change everything. It started with a feeling, the same instinct that had kept her alive during reconnaissance missions in hostile territory. Someone was watching her. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia. Military veterans often struggled with hypervigilance, seeing threats where none existed. But Sarah's instincts had been honed by years of training and real-world experience. She began to notice patterns. A black sedan appeared across the street from her shop 3 days in a row, always with tinted windows, always parked for exactly 47 minutes. The same man ordered coffee twice in 1 week, paying with cash and asking questions about her schedule. Another customer took photos of the shop's interior with his phone, claiming he wanted to show his wife the cute decorations. Sarah's military training kicked in automatically. She varied her routes home, checking for tails. She started keeping inventory of everyone who entered her shop, noting faces and behaviors. Her apartment above the coffee shop became a fortress: additional locks, security cameras disguised as regular fixtures, and emergency supplies stored in hidden compartments. Emma noticed the changes immediately. "You seem tense lately. Is everything okay?" "Just tired," Sarah replied. But her friend wasn't convinced. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? I mean, I know we haven't known each other long, but I care about you." Sarah felt a stab of guilt. Emma's genuine concern reminded her of why she'd wanted this normal life in the first place. But how could she explain that trained killers might be watching her every move? How could she drag an innocent kindergarten teacher into whatever was coming? The truth was that Sarah's past had finally caught up with her. During her last deployment, she'd uncovered evidence of weapons trafficking involving high-ranking military officials and international criminals. Her testimony had sent several powerful men to prison, but their organization was vast and patient. They'd waited until she thought she was safe, until she'd built something worth protecting. The coffee shop represented everything Sarah had never thought she could have: community, friendship, and peace. But it also made her vulnerable. For the first time in years, she had something to lose beyond her own life. 2 nights before the confrontation, Sarah's worst fears were confirmed. She returned from Emma's birthday dinner to find her apartment had been searched. Nothing was missing, but subtle signs revealed the intrusion. A book moved slightly on the shelf, a coffee cup turned a different direction, dust patterns disturbed on surfaces. Professional work, but Sarah's trained eye caught every detail. They weren't trying to steal anything or gather intelligence. This was a message: we know where you live, where you work, where you've built your new life. The psychological warfare was beginning. Sarah spent that night checking her weapons cache and emergency protocols. Hidden behind false walls and inside modified furniture were items from her previous life: tactical gear, communication equipment, and enough firepower to handle a small war. She'd hoped never to need them again. The next morning, she opened the coffee shop as usual, but everything had changed. Every customer was a potential threat. Every noise outside made her hand drift toward the concealed knife at her waist. Emma stopped by for her usual morning chat, and Sarah had to force herself to act normal. "You look exhausted," Emma observed. "When's the last time you took a day off?" "I'll rest when things calm down," Sarah replied, scanning the street through the window. "What things?" "Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on?" For a moment, Sarah considered telling her everything. Emma deserved to know that danger might be coming to their quiet town. But then she imagined Emma's reaction, the fear in those trusting eyes, and the way their friendship would change forever. Some burdens couldn't be shared. "Nothing's going on. I'm just overthinking some business decisions." Emma didn't believe her, but she didn't push. That was one of the things Sarah loved about her friend. She respected boundaries, even when it clearly worried her. As the day progressed, Sarah's tension increased. The watchers were getting bolder, more obvious. A van with darkened windows circled the block multiple times. A man in a business suit sat in the park across the street, pretending to read a newspaper, but never turning the pages. Another customer asked detailed questions about the shop's back exit and whether she lived alone. Sarah knew the attack was imminent. The only question was when and how they would make their move. She began mentally preparing for combat, reviewing escape routes, and calculating angles of attack. The coffee shop's layout, once cozy and welcoming, transformed in her mind into a tactical environment with cover positions, choke points, and weapon opportunities. That evening, as she locked up the shop, Sarah made a decision. She would stay late, do inventory in the back room, and give them the opportunity they were waiting for. Better to face them on her terms than to let innocent people get caught in the crossfire. Better to end this quickly before Emma or her customers were put at risk. She dimmed the lights and moved to the back room, but left the rear door slightly ajar, an apparent vulnerability that would be too tempting to ignore. Then she waited, every sense alert, every muscle ready. The peaceful life she'd built was about to collide with the warrior she'd always been. Outside, 3 men approached the coffee shop. They'd been watching for weeks, studying patterns, waiting for the perfect moment. They knew Sarah Martinez had been a Navy SEAL, but they'd seen her serving coffee and chatting with customers. They'd convinced themselves that military training faded when not used, that people went soft in civilian life. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The 3 men moved through the alley behind Main Street, like predators stalking their prey. Marcus Webb led the group, a former military contractor who'd lost everything when Sarah's testimony exposed his weapons trafficking operation. Behind him followed Tony Reeves and Jake Sullivan, both ex-Special Forces soldiers who'd been dishonorably discharged for war crimes that Sarah had helped uncover. Webb had spent 2 years in federal prison, watching his criminal empire crumble while Sarah Martinez disappeared into witness protection. When she emerged in this small town, thinking she was safe, Webb saw his chance for revenge. He wanted her to suffer before she died, to lose everything she'd built just like he had. "Remember, we do this slow," Webb whispered as they approached the coffee shop's back door. "I want her to know why she's dying." Tony cracked his knuckles, a nervous habit that had annoyed his military commanders years ago. "You sure she's still in there?" "Lights went out 20 minutes ago." "She's there," Webb confirmed, checking the pistol under his jacket. Doing inventory in the back room, just like every Thursday night. Creature of habit, just like all military types. Jake peered through the slightly open back door. Too easy. This feels like a trap. Webb laughed quietly. She's been serving coffee for 6 months, Jake. Playing house, making friends with the locals. You think she's sitting in there with an assault rifle waiting for us? People go soft when they get comfortable. She's forgotten who she used to be. Inside the coffee shop, Sarah crouched behind the industrial refrigerator, every muscle coiled and ready. She'd heard their whispered conversation through the thin back door, recognizing Webb's voice immediately. He'd been the primary target of her investigation, the man whose testimony had put dozens of corrupt officials behind bars. She'd known this confrontation was inevitable from the moment she'd decided to testify. Her fingers traced the combat knife attached to her belt, then moved to check the tactical baton hidden in the false bottom of a supply drawer she'd modified. The coffee shop might look innocent, but Sarah had prepared it for exactly this scenario. Every room had weapons hidden in accessible locations. Every corner offered tactical advantages she'd studied and memorized. The back door creaked as it opened wider. Webb's silhouette appeared first, followed by his 2 accomplices. They moved with military precision, weapons drawn but relaxed. They expected to find a frightened coffee shop owner, not a trained killer. Sarah Martinez, Webb called out softly. I know you're in here. Time to pay for what you did to my life. Sarah remained silent, controlling her breathing the way she'd been taught during SEAL training. Her heart rate was elevated but steady. Her mind was completely calm, calculating distances and angles of attack. She was no longer the friendly barista who knew everyone's coffee order. She was a Navy SEAL in enemy territory. Tony moved toward the front of the shop, while Jake headed for the supply closet. Webb remained near the back door, blocking the most obvious escape route. Standard tactical positioning. But they'd made a critical error. They were splitting up in an environment Sarah knew better than they did. She waited until Tony passed the refrigerator, then moved with lethal silence. Her hand covered his mouth while the knife found the space between his ribs, angled upward toward his heart. He dropped without a sound, his weapon clattering briefly on the floor before Sarah caught it. Tony, Webb called when he heard the noise. Sarah had already moved, sliding behind the coffee counter as Jake investigated the sound. He found Tony's body and immediately raised his weapon, scanning the room with professional caution. She's here, he reported quietly. Tony's down. Webb's demeanor changed instantly. The confident predator became a wary hunter who'd realized his prey had teeth. Spread out. Watch the exits. She can't have gone far. But Sarah wasn't trying to escape. This was her territory now, her battlefield. She'd spent months learning every creak in the floorboards, every shadow cast by the streetlights outside. Jake moved carefully through the dining area, his weapon sweeping left and right. But he was looking for a hiding civilian, not anticipating an attack from above. Sarah had climbed onto the counter display case, using skills developed during urban warfare training. When Jake passed underneath, she dropped onto his shoulders, her arm wrapping around his throat in a sleeper hold that cut off blood flow to his brain. He struggled for 8 seconds before going limp. 2 down, 1 to go. Webb had heard the scuffle and was moving toward the front of the shop, his pistol extended and ready. He was the most dangerous of the 3, with legitimate military training and years of combat experience. Sarah couldn't afford to underestimate him. Impressive, Webb called out as he found Jake's unconscious body. But you can't hide forever. I've got backup coming. More men, more weapons. You killed my partners, but you're still outnumbered. Sarah knew he was lying about backup. This was personal revenge, not a military operation. Webb wanted to handle her himself. But his words revealed something important. He was angry now, emotional rather than tactical. Anger made people predictable. She picked up Jake's dropped weapon and checked the ammunition. 17 rounds in a standard military sidearm. More than enough if she used them wisely. You destroyed my life, Webb continued, moving slowly through the dining area. Cost me millions of dollars, sent me to prison, ruined my reputation. All for what? Some misguided sense of honor. Sarah smiled grimly. Honor wasn't misguided when it saved innocent lives from illegal weapons sales. But she didn't respond to his taunts. Talking would reveal her position, and she had no interest in justifying her actions to a criminal. Webb paused near the front counter, clearly frustrated by her silence. You know what I learned in prison? Patience. I had 2 years to plan this moment, to imagine all the ways I could make you suffer. Your little coffee shop, your friendship with that teacher next door, this pathetic attempt at a normal life. I'm going to destroy all of it. The mention of Emma sent ice through Sarah's veins. If Webb had been watching long enough to know about her friendship, he might target Emma as well. She couldn't let this extend beyond tonight. She made her decision and stepped out from behind the counter, weapon raised, and trained on Webb's center mass. It ends here, Marcus. Just you and me. Webb spun toward her voice, his own weapon coming up with practiced speed. For a moment, they stood 15 feet apart, each with a clear shot at the other. In the dim light filtering through the front windows, they looked like gunslingers from an old western. But this confrontation carried the weight of real history and genuine hatred. There she is, Webb said with genuine satisfaction. The famous Sarah Martinez. How's civilian life treating you? Getting soft serving coffee to soccer moms. Soft enough to let you find me, Sarah replied, her weapon never wavering. Stupid enough to let you get this close. But not weak enough to let you walk away. Webb laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think this ends with me? I'm just the beginning. There are others who want you dead, others with longer reach and deeper pockets. You can't hide forever. I'm not hiding anymore. They stared at each other across the coffee shop that had become a battlefield. Webb was positioned near the front door, Sarah near the counter. Both had clear shots. Both were trained killers. Both knew that the next few seconds would determine who walked away. But Sarah had advantages Webb didn't know about. She'd spent months in this space, knew every angle and reflection. She'd noticed the mirror behind the counter that gave her a view of Webb's full position, including the hand grenade attached to his belt. Military contractors often carried extra firepower, and Webb was the type to bring backup plans. More importantly, Sarah was fighting to protect something, while Webb was only seeking revenge. Purpose made the difference between a good soldier and a great one. Last chance, Webb said. Drop the weapon, and I'll make it quick. Counteroffer, Sarah replied. Walk away now, and you might live to see morning. Webb's finger tightened on the trigger just as Sarah dropped and rolled behind the counter. His shot shattered the espresso machine, sending sparks and steam across the room. Sarah came up firing, 3 quick shots that forced Webb to dive behind an overturned table. The real battle was just beginning. The coffee shop erupted into chaos as gunfire shattered the peaceful atmosphere Sarah had worked so hard to create. Webb's shots splintered wood and shattered glass, destroying months of careful decoration and turning her sanctuary into a war zone. But Sarah moved through the destruction with deadly calm, her training taking complete control. She rolled behind the industrial coffee grinder as Webb's next shot sparked off the metal surface inches from her head. The smell of gunpowder mixed with coffee beans and steam from the damaged espresso machine, creating a surreal combination that would haunt her dreams for years to come. You can't hide behind that counter forever, Webb shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. I've got all night. Sarah knew he was wrong on both counts. The gunshots would bring police within minutes, and Webb was already making tactical mistakes driven by anger and frustration. She'd learned during her military service that emotional enemies were dangerous, but predictable. Webb wanted to savor his revenge, which gave her opportunities. She pulled a small mirror from her tactical kit and used it to observe Webb's position without exposing herself. He'd taken cover behind an overturned table near the front door, but his positioning revealed poor tactical thinking. He'd trapped himself with limited escape routes, focused more on dramatic confrontation than strategic advantage. The sound of sirens began in the distance. Someone had called the police, probably Mrs. Chun from the apartment building across the street. Sarah had maybe 3 minutes before law enforcement arrived, and she couldn't afford to be found with multiple bodies and military-grade weapons. This needed to end quickly and cleanly. Webb seemed to realize the same thing. Hear that? Your new friends are coming to save you. But they'll find you dead before they get here. He threw something across the room, a flashbang grenade that clattered across the floor towards Sarah's position. She recognized the sound immediately and dove away, covering her ears and closing her eyes just as the device exploded with blinding light and deafening noise. Even with preparation, the flashbang left Sarah temporarily disoriented. Her ears rang, and spots danced in her vision as she struggled to regain her bearings. But her muscle memory guided her movements, rolling toward a new position as Webb's footsteps approached. "Got you now." Webb's voice seemed to come from underwater, distorted by her damaged hearing. Sarah's vision cleared just in time to see Webb standing over her, his pistol aimed at her head with a satisfied smirk on his face. But he'd made the classic villain mistake, talking instead of shooting. In that half-second of hesitation, Sarah's legs swept his feet out from under him. Webb crashed to the floor, his weapon flying across the room as Sarah rolled on top of him. They grappled hand to hand, rolling between overturned tables and scattered coffee cups. Webb was larger and stronger, but Sarah had years of close-quarters combat training that made her movements precise and efficient. She got her arm around his throat in a rear-naked choke, but Webb drove his elbow back into her ribs, breaking her hold and creating space. He spun and threw a punch that Sarah barely blocked, the impact sending shockwaves up her arm. These weren't the clumsy swings of a street fighter. Webb had real training and experience. They circled each other between the destroyed furniture, both breathing heavily, both looking for an opening. Blood trickled from a cut on Sarah's forehead where she'd hit the counter during their fall. Webb's left arm hung slightly limp where she'd hyperextended his shoulder. "You know what I did to your old unit commander?" Webb gasped. "Colonel Richards? He had an accident last month. Fell down some stairs. Broke his neck." Sarah felt a flash of rage that she immediately suppressed. Richards had been like a father to her during training, the officer who'd pushed her to become the best soldier she could be. But emotion was what Webb wanted. He was trying to make her angry, careless, predictable. Instead, Sarah smiled coldly. "Good thing I learned from better teachers than you." She feinted left then, attacked right, her knee driving toward Webb's solar plexus. He caught her leg and twisted, trying to throw her off balance. But Sarah used the momentum to spin into an elbow strike that caught him in the temple. Webb staggered backward, dazed, and Sarah pressed her advantage. A quick combination, palm strike to the nose, knee to the midsection, hammer fist to the back of the neck as he doubled over. Webb collapsed to one knee, blood streaming from his broken nose. The sirens were getting closer. Red and blue lights began flashing through the front windows as the first police car rounded the corner onto Main Street. Sarah had perhaps 30 seconds before officers entered the building. Webb looked up at her with hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over. There are others. They'll keep coming until you're dead." "Let them come," Sarah replied, picking up Webb's dropped pistol. "I'm done running." But Webb's hand was moving toward the grenade on his belt, fingers wrapping around the pin. His expression shifted from defeat to malicious triumph. If he couldn't kill Sarah, he could at least destroy her new life, and everyone who tried to help her. "If I can't have my revenge, I'll settle for collateral damage," he snarled, beginning to pull the pin. Sarah didn't hesitate. Her knife appeared in her hand with fluid motion, thrown with precision learned from years of combat training. The blade buried itself in Webb's chest, stopping his hand just before the pin came free. He looked down at the knife with surprise, then up at Sarah with something that might have been respect. "Semper Fi," he whispered, then collapsed. Police officers burst through the front door just as Webb hit the floor. "Drop your weapons. Hands where we can see them." Sarah immediately raised her hands, the empty pistol falling to the floor. "I'm Sarah Martinez, the owner. There was a break-in. These men attacked me." The officers advanced cautiously, weapons drawn, taking in the destruction around them. Overturned furniture, broken glass, bullet holes in the walls, and 3 men down. It looked like a war zone, not a burglary gone wrong. "Ma'am, we need you to step away from the weapons and keep your hands visible," the lead officer said. He was young, probably new to the force, clearly overwhelmed by the scene. Sarah complied, moving slowly and deliberately. "Officer, I need to tell you that one of these men was carrying explosive devices. You should call the bomb squad before anyone else enters." The mention of explosives caused immediate alarm. The officers stepped back, one speaking rapidly into his radio, while the other kept his weapon trained on Sarah. Within minutes, the street filled with emergency vehicles, police cars, ambulances, fire trucks, and a hazmat unit. Detective Ray Morrison arrived 20 minutes later, a 20-year veteran who'd seen everything small-town crime had to offer. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for the scene inside the coffee shop. It looked like a military operation, not a civilian crime. Sarah sat in the back of an ambulance while a paramedic cleaned the cut on her forehead. She'd given her initial statement to the first officers, sticking to a simplified version of events. 3 men had broken into her shop, demanded money, and attacked her when she refused. She'd fought back in self-defense. Ms. Martinez, Detective Morrison said, approaching with a notepad. I need to ask you some questions about what happened here tonight. Of course, Sarah replied. I've already told the other officers everything I remember. Morrison studied her carefully. Something didn't add up about this woman. She was too calm, too composed for someone who'd just survived a violent attack. Her injuries were minor despite facing 3 armed men. And her story about fighting off trained killers with kitchen knives and coffee equipment strained credibility. These weren't ordinary burglars, Morrison said. We've identified them through fingerprints. Marcus Webb, Tony Reeves, and Jake Sullivan. All have military backgrounds, all recently released from federal prison. This wasn't random, Ms. Martinez. They came here specifically for you. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I don't know why they would target me. I run a coffee shop. I don't have enemies. Maybe not now, Morrison replied. But what about before? Before you came to Millfield? We're going to need to know your complete background if we're going to understand what happened here. Before Sarah could answer, Emma appeared at the ambulance door. She'd heard the sirens and rushed over, still in her pajamas and a hastily thrown-on coat. When she saw the destroyed coffee shop and Sarah covered in blood, her face went white. Oh my God, Sarah, are you okay? What happened? Sarah felt her carefully constructed story becoming more complicated. How could she explain this to Emma without revealing everything she'd been hiding? How could she protect her friend from the truth without lying about who she really was? I'm fine, Sarah said, accepting Emma's worried embrace. Just some guys who picked the wrong place to rob. But even as she said it, Sarah knew her peaceful life in Millfield was over. The attack had been too public, too violent to hide. Questions would be asked, investigations would be conducted, and, eventually, the truth about her past would come out. More importantly, Webb's final words echoed in her mind. There were others. They would keep coming. Tonight's attack was just the beginning, and, next time, they might target Emma or other innocent people in their effort to get to her. As the crime scene investigators began their work and Detective Morrison prepared for a long interrogation, Sarah made a decision. She was done hiding, done pretending to be someone she wasn't. The Navy SEAL was back, and anyone else who wanted to threaten her new family would learn the same lesson Webb had learned tonight. Some mistakes could only be made once. 3 hours later, Sarah sat in the police station's interview room, finally ready to tell the truth. Detective Morrison had been patient, but persistent, clearly understanding that the official story didn't match the evidence. The coffee shop looked like a battlefield, not the scene of a simple robbery gone wrong. Ms. Martinez, Morrison said, setting down a thick file on the table between them. We've run background checks on you and the 3 men who attacked you tonight. What we found is interesting. Your records show you moved to Millfield 6 months ago, but before that, there's almost nothing. No employment history, no credit history, no digital footprint. It's like you didn't exist before coming here. Sarah looked at the file, knowing it contained only the surface information available to local law enforcement. Her real records were buried deep in military and federal databases that would take special clearance to access. The 3 men who attacked you, however, have very detailed records, Morrison continued. All former military, all connected to a weapons trafficking case from 3 years ago. A case that was broken wide open by testimony from a Navy SEAL who was never publicly identified for security reasons. He leaned forward, studying Sarah's reaction. I'm going to ask you directly, Ms. Martinez. Are you that Navy SEAL? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. She could continue the charade, demand a lawyer, and hope the Federal Witness Protection Program could relocate her again. But Webb's words haunted her. There were others, and they would keep coming. Running hadn't solved the problem, only delayed it. Yes, she said finally. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, United States Navy SEALs, retired. I was the primary witness in Operation Broken Arrow, the investigation that exposed the weapons trafficking network these men were part of. Morrison nodded slowly, as if pieces of a complex puzzle were finally falling into place. That explains the tactical precision of tonight's fight. 3 trained killers versus 1 woman. And somehow you walked away almost uninjured. But why didn't you tell us this from the beginning? Because I wanted to believe my old life was over, Sarah replied. I thought I could disappear into small-town anonymity and never have to think about warfare again. I wanted to serve coffee and make friends and pretend I was normal. But you're not normal, Morrison observed. You're a trained killer who can take out 3 armed men with kitchen knives and coffee equipment. That's not a skill set that just disappears. Sarah smiled grimly. No, it doesn't. Tonight proved that. The interview was interrupted when Agent Jennifer Walsh from the FBI arrived. She was a serious woman in her 40s, dressed in a dark suit, and carrying federal credentials that immediately changed the dynamics in the room. Detective Morrison, thank you for your work tonight, Agent Walsh said. But this case now falls under federal jurisdiction. Ms. Martinez is under our protection. Morrison started to protest, but Walsh's expression brooked no argument. The men who attacked Ms. Martinez tonight were part of an international criminal organization. This goes far beyond local law enforcement capabilities. Sarah studied Agent Walsh carefully. Something about her manner suggested this wasn't a random federal intervention. You've been watching me. We've been watching the people who were watching you, Walsh admitted. We knew Webb and his associates had been released from prison. We knew they blamed you for their convictions. We suspected they would eventually make contact. You used me as bait, Sarah realized, anger building in her voice. We protected you as much as possible while gathering intelligence on their network, Walsh corrected. But, yes, we needed to let them come to you so we could trace their connections and identify other threats. Sarah felt betrayed all over again. First, the military had asked her to risk everything to expose corruption. Then, witness protection had promised her safety in exchange for her testimony. Now the FBI had used her as an unwitting agent in their ongoing investigation. What's the extent of the threat? Sarah asked. How many others are there? Walsh opened her briefcase and removed a thick folder filled with photographs and documents. Webb's organization was larger than we initially realized. International weapons trafficking, drug smuggling, contract killing. Your testimony helped us prosecute the leadership, but middle management and field operatives are still active. She spread photographs across the table. Sarah recognized some faces from her military service. Others were strangers with cold eyes and military bearing. These 12 individuals have been identified as potential threats to your safety. 4 are currently in custody, 3 are dead including tonight's attackers, and 5 remain at large. We believe they're planning coordinated action. Sarah studied the remaining photographs. Professional soldiers turned criminals, men with the skills and motivation to finish what Webb had started. Her peaceful life in Millfield had been an illusion, a brief intermission between acts of a longer war. What are my options? Sarah asked. Witness protection can relocate you again, Walsh said. New identity, new location, complete separation from your current life. It's the safest option. Sarah thought about Emma, probably sitting in her apartment right now, worried sick and wondering what had really happened to her friend. She thought about her coffee shop, destroyed but reparable, representing everything she'd tried to build. She thought about Mrs. Henderson and her Tuesday lattes, about Jake studying for his engineering exams, about the mayor who wanted her to join the Chamber of Commerce. Or, Sarah asked, or we use you as an active asset, Walsh continued. Help us track down the remaining threats and neutralize them permanently. It's more dangerous, but it would allow you to keep your current life and protect the people you care about. Detective Morrison had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. There's a third option. We can provide local protection while federal agencies handle the broader investigation. Keep you safe without asking you to risk your life again. Sarah appreciated Morrison's concern, but she knew better. Local police, no matter how dedicated, weren't equipped to handle international criminals with military training. And passive protection meant living in constant fear, always looking over her shoulder, never knowing when the next attack would come. "I need to see Emma," Sarah said. "Before I decide anything, I need to talk to my friend." Walsh checked her watch. "It's 4 in the morning. Maybe we should wait until—" "No," Sarah interrupted. "She's awake. She's probably been awake all night, worried about me. I owe her an explanation." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat in Emma's small apartment above the bookstore. Her friend had indeed been awake, pacing the floor and checking her phone constantly for updates. When Sarah walked in, still wearing clothes stained with blood and coffee, Emma burst into tears. "I thought you were dead," Emma sobbed, wrapping her arms around Sarah. "When I saw the coffee shop, all that destruction, I thought whoever did this had killed you." Sarah held her friend, feeling the weight of her deception over the past 6 months. Emma had opened her heart to someone she thought was a simple coffee shop owner, not a trained killer with deadly enemies. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said gently, "about who I really am." Over the next hour, Sarah explained everything. Her military service, the investigation that had made her a target, the witness protection program that had brought her to Millfield, and tonight's attack by men seeking revenge for crimes she'd helped expose. Emma listened in silence, her expression shifting from disbelief to understanding to fear. When Sarah finished, they sat quietly for several minutes. "So you're not really Sarah Martinez, the coffee shop owner," Emma said finally. "Yes, I am," Sarah replied. "That's exactly who I am. But I'm also Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, Navy SEAL. Both parts are real." Emma studied her friend's face, seeing details she'd never noticed before. The way Sarah's eyes constantly scanned for threats. The precise, economical way she moved. The scars on her hands that she'd always attributed to kitchen accidents. "Are you safe now?" Emma asked. "No," Sarah answered honestly. "There are more people who want me dead. I have to decide whether to disappear again or stay and fight." "What do you want to do?" Sarah thought about the question seriously. 6 months ago, all she'd wanted was peace. Tonight had proven that peace was impossible as long as her enemies remained free. But, more than that, she'd discovered something unexpected in Millfield. She'd found home. "I want to stay," Sarah said. "I want to rebuild the coffee shop and keep serving Mrs. Henderson her Tuesday lattes. I want to help Jake pass his engineering exams and listen to the mayor talk about Chamber of Commerce meetings. I want to be your friend and live in this town and pretend normal life is possible. But, I can't do that while people are hunting me. It puts everyone I care about at risk. It puts you at risk." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing everything she'd learned. Then, she surprised Sarah with her response. "So we make sure they can't hurt anyone," Emma said firmly. "We stop them. We." Sarah laughed despite the seriousness of the situation. "Emma, you're a kindergarten teacher. These are trained killers. And you're a trained killer too," Emma pointed out. "But you're also my friend, and this is my town. If someone wants to hurt you or threaten the people here, then we stop them. Together." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with coffee or cozy apartments. For the first time since leaving the military, she didn't feel alone. She had something worth fighting for and someone willing to stand with her. "It's going to be dangerous," Sarah warned. "I teach 5-year-olds," Emma replied with a smile. "I've handled dangerous before." As dawn broke over Millfield, Sarah made her decision. She would work with the FBI to track down the remaining threats, but on her terms. She wouldn't hide or run. She would use every skill she'd learned in the military to protect the life she'd built and the people she cared about. The men who'd attacked her coffee shop had made a fatal error. They'd assumed that a Navy SEAL serving coffee had gone soft, lost her edge, become vulnerable. Instead, they'd awakened something that had been dormant, but never destroyed. Sarah Martinez, the coffee shop owner, was real, but so was Lieutenant Martinez, the Navy SEAL. And anyone else who threatened her new family would learn that some people are most dangerous when they have something worth protecting. The war wasn't over. But now Sarah was ready to finish it.